Hey folks, this is Strong Games and welcome to Total War Warhammer 3. Today we're going to look at kind of a getting started guide for Tyrion. And so one of the things to know about the High Elves factions and Tyrion's faction in particular is Tyrion's starting position is really strong. Lothern is one of the most valuable regions in the game, gets lots and lots of income. It's particularly easy to defend for the most part, um, but major advantages purely from your starting position. Now, there are a couple of things that Tyrion gets specifically. We'll just pull this up here. So, Tyrion's faction gets additional bonus to diplomacy with High Elves. They have reduced construction time to the Shrine of Cain building, which I'll show you in a second, and then they get kind of a reduced recruitment duration for infantry and cavalry, even though High Elves' strongest units tend to be archers. The Shrine of Cain thing is not super valuable. Shrine of Cain is up here, but it is something that you want to keep note of if you want to take the Sword of Cain. Now, one of the things we're going to do here to get started with Tyrion, just started with a mage. So I like to put the mage into the army, and then we're going to pick a fight with these guys. So then we get to either execute and gain experience, replenish our army, or we can ransom the captive. So one of the most important mechanics for the High Elves is the influence mechanic. Influence allows you to do quite a few things, but taking at least one of these really early on, like right now, is a really valuable thing because it means that our faction is going to start building some influence. Influence is used to recruit certain lords, heroes. It's also used to, shall we say, tweak diplomacy a little bit in your favor, because you can spend it to basically adjust, either improve or decrease relations between your own faction and another faction, or between two other factions. So if you really think that Avalorn should be friends with the Dreadfleet, you can actually spend your influence to make that happen. Yeah, getting that early on, started early on at least, is pretty important, and getting your mage started leveling up is really good too. Now, Lothern, like I said, starts as a very rich region. There are a few buildings here you might want to start with. I tend to like building the growth building here first, purely because it is a quite a useful thing to get this region built up as quickly as possible. In fact, that should be one of your major goals to start with. And then usually I like to get started building the plaza here as well. Now, we've got those kind of set up. You can build this building if you like. I'm going to, just for the sake of something to spend the money on for now. But Tyrion actually has some really important kind of traits to be aware of. And one is that he gets significantly reduced upkeep for spearmen, Silver Iron Guard, Rangers, Archers, Silver Helms. So filling Tyrion's army with archers is really good. He also recruits significantly higher Lothern Sea Guards. So Lothern Sea Guard are quite good early on, and so one of the things we'll do with Tyrion here is we want to attack this section here, and we actually have probably a good enough army to do that. So it's going to be a Pyrrhic victory, and we're going to lose some units, but you're going to see me just go ahead with this anyways. And one of the reasons is that Tyrion's starting army, spearmen are particularly poor, and these Silver Helms also kind of suck. So I'm going to let that go ahead, and just for sake, we're going to loot and occupy this. We want to get a little bit of extra money and get some replenishment back for these other units. And then I'm just going to recruit some archers. Archers are really good, but the armory that you have to be aware of is this one back here. Now they can't get to us over here. We've got a couple of turns before they get over here, and we've already leveled Tyrion up a little bit. Wary is a really good trait for Tyrion because it protects against being ambushed. This is also quite good to start with. So I'm going to select this because ultimately we want to either get to here quickly, or we can actually start, building up Tyrion's abilities as well. All right, so major goal for Tyrion to start with is securing this province. Once you have this province secured, this faction right here will, for the most part, be killed off. They might have an army that just isn't in a city when you finish them off. But this faction is kind of your priority to get rid of. The other thing too here is that there are a lot of interlopers starting to close in on Lothern, and one of those is the orcs that are over this direction. So I usually like to focus on cleaning up this area. I usually like to come and get rid of the orcs if I can. And often over here there is the Dread Fleet, and usually these guys end up attacking and getting a foothold in here. So cleaning up some of these non-High Elf factions is a really good way to start Tyrion's campaign. Once you've done that, going to actually find whoever is the weakest High Elf faction. So these guys are quite weak. Their only strength rate is 197. And if I go to these guys over here, we'll see that they have a different... They're 198, so they're also quite weak. But what I tend to do is I tend to come this way, and it takes a while to clean things up there. So conquering the High Elf factions is not always about making war upon them, because you can confederate them too. So I'm just going to make a non-aggression pact with these guys. I do that because they hold two regions that are really quite annoying to take, which are these gates. These gates can have really good garrisons, so they tend to be pretty costly to take through conquest. And you have Alariel over here as well, who we already have a non-aggression pact with, so getting some trade agreements going is often a really good way to get a little bit of money, as well as just fostering relations with factions that you probably want to confederate at some point. So here we can get another trade agreement, and with that we're probably, yeah, that's probably all we'll be able to manage. We probably will end up attacking this group eventually, so I don't want to make any agreements with them. And these guys, we're just going to kind of leave where they are, because they're going to have their hands full with the pirates, I think. So that's kind of a brief start to this campaign, but we want to go into here. Make sure you don't forget to get that rolling. And then the High Elves also have several rights in the early game. These things are often not set up right away. This is the quickest one that you'll get, because once you own 3 settlements, it'll unlock. But generally speaking, you might get this one too pretty quickly. This can be really valuable early on because it gives you a decent amount of influence, and it gives you decreased construction costs for buildings. So this can often be another good one to use early. So with that, we'll just advance this. Now, one of the kind of major enemies that you're going to have to watch out for in a High Elf campaign is the Dark Elves, and we'll take a look at the victory conditions here when this turn is done. Because if we go look at those victory conditions, the Dark Elves are one of the major groups that we're going to have to try to get rid of. There are 2 major Dark Elf groups, one that we'll have to worry about pretty early on, and another that we just hope gets killed off by somebody else, even though that usually doesn't happen. So the first one is Morathi. Morathi is quite dangerous to the High Elves. She's very, very annoying early on, and that's the Cult of Pleasure. The Cult of Pleasure is located over here, and they typically conquer this area, and they end up in this area quite quickly. They're really annoying because they actually spread corruption, so they make it so that when you try to enter their regions, you get attrition. But long term, most of the things you have to do with the High Elves just purely require taking territory. Um, this ring in the middle here is probably the, or kind of horseshoe, I guess, the most important area to secure first, and then Naggarond is all the way up here. So Naggarond typically kind of secures that, and then they kind of advance down this direction. You'll get there eventually, but they are not really a concern in the early game. So here we're going to come back to here. We eventually want to move over this direction and take this, but we're going to add a few more troops. And I typically like to go and get started with archery prowess, because improving your archers with the High Elves early on, they can be quite powerful, and getting access to Wind Blast is good. If you have a different type of mage, they'll have a different spell there, and you can see we've started to build a little bit of influence. I'll just show one important thing here. So you can see here's the kind of mechanic that you need a certain amount of influence to recruit good lords. So basically, lords that don't require influence, they tend to have crappy traits. So like this one decreases your research rate, which is bad, and this one decreases the amount of income from buildings, which is also bad. Whereas the ones that are cost 60 influence, they tend to have quite good traits, so that's a pretty good trait. Flaming attacks and 75 charge bonus, 75% weapon strength. This one has 30% speed, gives you 10 extra melee defense, and then you'll have some that have, moderately good traits that only cost 15. There are a few traits that are really good. I don't actually see all of them here. This is quite a good trait for princesses sometimes. There are ones there as well. There are some bad traits in here as well. Yeah, basically you want to take a look through these, especially if you can get your hands on a builder. A builder is really good early on as you kind of improve your provinces. Entrepreneurs are very good. They give a lot of extra income, and administrators are also quite good early on. So getting lords that have those traits can be really, really quite good in the early stages. So with that, that's kind of all I got for this one. If you like the content, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to the channel for more in the future. Thank you for watching.